Today, I've done something that I've not done before on this channel, which is to have somebody join me here at Guitar Tips headquarters. This is my friend Adam Smale.
How you doing, everybody?
A great guitar player who happens to live in my neighborhood. We've gotten together for coffee a couple of times. And the last time we met up, we were talking about this kind of magical art of comping for yourself and how to sound like two guitar players. And we thought it would be a fun idea to actually get together and hash it out in real time, to give some examples, give some exercises that you can work on, and just to play a little bit. Where does all that come from? What inspires your approach to comping and playing lines together?
Thanks for asking. I guess you could take a good go as far back as listening to Chet Atkins when I was a kid. I remember sitting down. My dad had some Chet Atkins records, and I remember moving the needle over and trying to probably sounding very much like that. And then, of course, later on came Lenny Breau. So I would say, huge inspiration there. And then Bill Evans too.
And so, what's an example of something that Lenny Breau might play on Beautiful Love?
Okay, so, and then of course I've never really sat down and transcribed really. I just kind of like figured out ideas to sort of do a Lenny thing, right? Yeah. But I think I played something like this, or let's say, you have to kind of reduce it to usually thirds and sevenths.
Okay.
And if you can grab another note on top of that, then that's kind of gravy. But if I just stuck to thirds and sevenths, this could represent, this G and a D could represent the E minor 7 flat 5, which is the first chord that we played, right? So then now I'm on the A7 chord.
Right.
Because I know that through studying thirds and sevenths, all I have to do is drop the seventh of this chord. Now it becomes the third of the next chord.
And you've still got two fingers free to play melody.
Now I'm on D minor 7.
Right.
D7.
Sharp 9, flat 9. Oh, yeah. And there's your F major 7.
And then I could play a regular chord voice. And there's nothing saying that you can't.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
Right.
So there's your A7.
Right. That's the first 16 measures, basically, of the changes. But I'm just kind of trying to play it slow.
Right. So I'm going to try.
So we could sort of, and then we can break it down a little bit deeper in a bit if you want to try it.
I just want to try it. So. I might come up here.
And then about B flat 7, I think we're on.
Right.
And that's actually a really good practice, just to play a song through really slow like that. Because if you can play it really slow and not lose track of where you are, then you know the song really, really well.
Yeah, for sure.
As a sort of tip for everyone out there. So if you, I know, like, if you're not used to this, I notice that you're tending to use your first finger a lot.
Yeah.
Which is kind of more like probably what most people do for a chord melody.
Right.
But there's a difference between comping for yourself and a chord melody. I think if you try to comp for yourself in a chord melody style, it can sound heavy and plodding because you're usually trying to go for big chords, right? Where if you reduce it down to just the third and the seventh, if many of you out there don't know, that can kind of, those two notes give you the essence of the chord.
Right.
If it's if it has a flat third in it, it's either minor or minor 7 flat 5, and if it has the major 7th in it, then it's either a minor chord with a major 7th or a major 7 chord. So try doing it maybe more with these two fingers.
Okay, so I'm gonna try that. So
yeah, and then if you ever see videos of Lenny, lots of times he's using these two fingers to play the melody.
Okay, that's cool. I never noticed that.
And it's daunting.
Yes, it is.
If you haven't tried this before.
To think about this. Wow. Wow. Okay.
Yeah, you have to kind of split your brain.
Sure.
Like you literally have to think that
It's like I have
whatever
to have
two
operation.
Whatever two letters, lobotomy.
Yeah.
Whatever two fingers you have left over, that's the left hand of the piano.
Right.
And then whatever fingers are playing, improvising or playing the melody, is the right hand of the piano.
Yeah. Okay.
So you can even just, let's use a blues. Okay. So what you can just let's try to play through a blues changes, but I'm just gonna pedal on one note.
Okay.
On top.
And what do you want me to do?
Watch.
Okay. Fair enough.
Okay, so I'm using E flat and A for the F7 chord, and then sometimes I might play the D in there because that's the 13. Especially if something's available, I'll try to grab it.
Right. So that's like
yeah,
like that, but it's over here.
Right.
Okay.
And then you brought up a good point in a way without saying anything, is that you're including the root, but I'm not including the root.
Right.
Unless it's in my line. So now I'll put it in the line. So I'm just going to use two notes. So I'm going to go.
So it's sharp 4 diminished. And just to hear it, I'm going to play bass.
Yeah.
So if you had a bass player, it would sound totally complete. But even even before I started playing, your imagination fills in the blanks.
Yeah.
Because you're playing with a great groove. So like the groove is there even when you're not. Like you were playing 4/4 like rhythm, right? You didn't need me to establish the rhythm because you already established the rhythm.
Yeah.
And the harmony, and it's almost like an optical illusion, but for your ears, like. You almost would imagine there's a bass player even when there's not.
Right. And I've gotten so used to doing this that I hear the root. Or maybe some people they're not used to hearing it, it might sound weird or empty. But lots of times I'll end up playing the root in the line anyway. So that's, even though it's above, you still get the whole picture.
Huh.
Right? It's like a sketch. I mean, really, in guitar, everything we play is an approximation anyway.
Right.
Right? Like compared to an orchestra.
Right.
Where you can play literally everything if you wanted to. Like, so we're only limited with so many fingers and so many strings. So that's why this third and seventh thing works great. And I think that's the real genius of Lenny Breau, taking those 3-note Bill Evans voicings and trying to do that on guitar.
Now, a minute ago you said, what we do on the guitar is always kind of a sketch because we only have so many strings.
Right.
But as I look at your guitar, I notice you have one more string than most folks have.
Which is also taken inspiration from Lenny Breau.
Okay, so that's a high A?
Yeah, if you play your A at the 5th fret on your first string, that's my string open.
Okay, and what does that give you?
One more extra string to play more notes.
Okay.
Because you feel a little bit limited on a 6-string guitar. At least I do.
Yeah.
maybe not until someone really gets into this. But then it'll make sense. I'll explain. So if I had only those, I could maybe stretch up to there while I'm trying to hold down a chord, right?
Right.
Whereas now,
that's pretty big range.
that's more than an octave, right? Without moving anywhere. So if I wanted to hold down the chord, I would have to move up to the other inversion of my 3rd and 7th, further up the neck, where now you don't have to. So I basically, if I just played the most basic scale that you can over an F7 chord, and then I'm throwing a passing tone in there. That's all the way from this C to that C on the 8th fret, and then up to an F.
Wow.
So that's more than an octave.
Yeah. Wow.
If I wanted to get to that F, I would have to go all the way to the 13th fret.
Right. Shift positions. Right.
Yeah.
Did you get to know Lenny Breau?
I didn't know. But the weird thing is, I've talked to Lenny Breau's daughter on the phone before, and I explained it to her as well as John Knowles as well with John Knowles, and I also knew another friend of Lenny's in Nashville that unfortunately is now deceased. But I explained it to all 3 people the same way. Even though I never met Lenny, he always seemed like he was like my older brother or my uncle that I never got a chance to meet somehow. There, I don't know why there felt like a connection. Maybe it was because I didn't realize it until I watched his daughter's movie, Emily, that, wow, there's some similar things in our background. Like we both started playing when we were really young. We both started playing professionally at the same age of 12, I think. And we both started off playing country. And Chet Atkins was both of our heroes, although he was way more into the Chet Atkins thing than me. I was kind of doing more like bluegrass and country stuff at first. And then I branched off got into ZZ Top and Van Halen and stuff like that, of course. Just growing up in the 80s, how can you not?
Sure. Yeah. Sure. Huh.
So all those things are there. All my influences maybe pop up, I think. believe it or not, like even though Eddie Van Halen didn't play jazz per se, he was still a huge influence on me.
How
And,
how so?
A lot of the that kind of, I don't know why. Maybe it's just from listening to it that I find that kind of stuff very easy to do. I don't do anymore like this, although there was a time way back in my teens where I did do two-handed tapping, but I haven't even done that for 40 years or something.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right, but you can, when you play a phrase like you just played, I can hear it coming out of Eddie, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's cool.
Yeah, and I just really dug. I don't think I understood it at the time, but now I do. They actually did play like jazz musicians.
Huh.
They played completely different from night to night. And Eddie improvised all the stuff in the recordings when they played, except for maybe towards the end.
Right.
More the later recordings, but early on he was always improvising stuff. And their dad was a jazz musician. So and then Alex Van Halen, the drummer of the group, did gigs with his dad all the time. And I think that's why they could swing so hard.
Yeah, that band really did swing.
Yeah. So there's that element of swing and shuffle that they played.
Right.
That when you hear people try to play Van Halen songs, they can't really do it properly.
Right.
Probably me included too. But I think us as jazz musicians, we sort of understand that swing thing more.
Right. It's why a cover band usually doesn't sound good playing a Jimmy Reed song either. It's just like they're not coming at it from the same kind of attitude of swing.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Huh.
So, I mean, you know, and then there's the Chet Atkins thing, which is another way of accompanying yourself, really.
Okay.
I mean, like...
So what does that look like?
You can think of, like, ragtime.
Sure.
Or stride.
Right.
Like, I think of it as, like, stride guitar.
Huh. For people, if they don't know that term, stride comes from piano. There's a style of piano called stride piano. So can you just break down a little bit what that is if people don't know?
Well, you may have seen old recordings like even Art Tatum or who else is known? Willie P. Johnson are known as stride players.
Willie the Lion Smith.
Yeah.
James P. Johnson and Willie the Lion Smith.
I get them mixed up. But anyway, it's a very busy left hand that's bouncing back and forth.
Right.
And essentially it's kind of doing the same thing that I'm doing here.
Right. Right. But on the piano, you'd be chasing around to do that. In the guitar, we have a position where you can do that. Okay.
And
so
then
cool.
so you have this accompaniment that I'm using my thumb.
Right.
Which is, you know, another influence from Chet Atkins and Lenny Breau. They both use some thumb picks too. So that's the left hand, and then I'm playing the melody on top.
And when you're playing Freight Train, are you using...
Probably mostly that. But for some, that's from the Chet Atkins thing. But when I play jazz, I'm kind of using 3 fingers.
Okay.
And don't ask me why.
Okay.
There was a time where I kind of even used my pinky more, but I do it less now.
Huh. Okay.
I noticed. And I actually play in this sort of comping for yourself Lenny Breau thing less than I used to.
Huh.
Maybe it's the New York influence, but I've just gotten into playing more lines.
Right.
I guess. And there's often more comping instruments around, so for some reason I just end up doing it less.
Okay.
It's not like I lost interest in it or anything like that, but
Right, but there is kind of a New York thing about just playing lines. Like, even I think about, like, Sonny Rollins at the Vanguard recording with just a rhythm section
Right.
and no comping instrument. So there is something kind of like New York tough about just playing lines and not worrying about harmony. But that
And it better burn too.
and it better burn. But that kind of leads me to wonder, like, why would you want, like, why would you want to accompany yourself when, and even though you're doing less of it now, what would be the...
Well, my favorite thing is doing a trio.
Okay.
So all you have is drums, bass, and me.
Okay.
So now, just because I can comfort myself doesn't mean I'm going to do it to the same extent or ferociousness or whatever every song. Sometimes I might do a whole chorus of not comping for myself at all or something, But I guess when there's no other person comping for you, it's nice not only for me. It helps you kind of keep track of where you are too, because it forces you to keep track of the chord changes because you have to know what you're doing.
Yeah.
Right. But it also helps the other musicians also hear stuff. Even drummers can pick up on chord changes. That doesn't mean that they know exactly what chord you're on right now, but when they hear a change, and see, when I comp, I do a lot of upbeats.
Okay.
Right?
Why is that?
That gives it more forward motion. And drummers like that. Drummers like to come in on offbeats because that helps it swing better.
Okay.
So you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that really helps it sound more full, like an actual whole band, when you can sort of give that illusion that there's someone else comping for you.
So you mentioned Bill Evans, you mentioned Lenny Breau, you mentioned Chet. Who else do you think of as a musician who can have this kind of dialogue with themselves?
Barney Kessel, I think. And then also another huge influence of me, Canadian guitar player. Because everyone thinks that Lenny was Canadian, but he actually wasn't.
Oh, I didn't know that.
He was actually born in Maine. Well, I grew up in Toronto. I'm not grew up in Toronto, but I lived in Toronto for 20 years.
Okay.
I'm Canadian, by the way. I had Lorne Lofsky to listen to all the time, right? And then where did Lorne Lofsky get a lot of influence from? Ed Bickert.
Ed Bickert,
Right. To me, like, Ed Bickert is one of the greatest jazz players ever, like, as up there as with Wes Montgomery or anybody you can think of. And what I really dig about him is that somehow he could distill all his ideas into just play the perfect thing every single time. Somehow. Right? And I think that's a bit of an influence too, because I used to listen to a lot of Ed Bickert.
Like, you would see him in clubs, or you listening to LPs, or both?
He stopped playing after a while. But I did, when I first moved to Toronto, I used to go see him all the time.
What was that place? The Spaghetti?
That's the Spaghetti. George's Spaghetti House is exactly where I went to go see him. He played there all the time.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. With Don Thompson.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I've done some gigs with Don Thompson as well. Was always fun to play with Don, because he would just lay out this nice solid pad of time, and because he was such a multi-instrumentalist, that he could follow you anywhere you wanted to go, and had so much experience. It was like, I think if you probably were to videotape me back then playing with Don, I'd probably have a permanent grin on my face as I'm playing, because everything just felt so effortless to play with him.
Huh.
And the same thing with Terry Clark. Did a few gigs with him in Toronto too.
Wow. If folks don't know, these are just, super world-class musicians who actually I became aware of at first through the live Jim Hall record. It's a record from, I think, 1975. It's just called Live. And
Jim Hall's another big influence too, I would say.
And that's the rhythm section on that record. It's Terry Clark and Don Thompson, and it's just one record, but sometime in the last few years, somebody released a whole treasure trove of recordings of that trio playing live. And then,
if I'm not mistaken, it might have even been Don that recorded that.
That's right.
Show.
Yeah.
And then it actually sounded, hey, that sounds pretty good. Why don't we put it on a record?
Yeah.
It sounds way better than we thought it was going to sound.
So that's how I became aware of Don Thompson and Terry Clark. But then subsequently, I've heard recordings with Ed Bickert and Don Thompson.
Right.
Yeah, when I was a kid, I heard about Ed Bickert, and like the only thing I could find him on was like Rob McConnell records, you know, and he wasn't featured that much, so I didn't get to really hear him until more recently. And then, I mean, not like recently, like last week, but not as a kid. But then I've heard him, on Paul Desmond records and on his own records. And
if you do want to listen to something, listen to him with Paul Desmond for sure. Ed Bickert. I can't remember the recording right now, but I think it's the first recording that Ed Bickert did with Paul Desmond, and Ron Carter plays bass on it. It's so good. It's so good. And
so for somebody who is just starting with this idea of comping for yourself,
it's a heady topic. It really is. I mean, I'm not trying to scare you folks out there, but it does take some work to sort of get it down. Figure out what the third and the seventh of every chord is and start with that.
Okay.
And you could
play it. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I just want to make sure people get the third and the seventh. You're mostly doing that on the A and the D string.
Mostly. Sometimes I might come down here.
Okay.
But you have to realize that if you start playing down too low, you get sort of what I call elephant fart territory, where like you're stepping down into the bass territory so much that it sounds like you're trying to compete with the bass player.
Right.
So I sort of have a cutoff point in my head that if I'm using the sixth and the fifth string, I try not to go past the seventh fret.
Okay. That's fair.
Yeah. But here I can, even though because the timbre of these strings are a little bit different too.
Sure. Yeah.
Right. So if I played, it's just going to sound a little bit more muddier down here.
Yeah, I hear that.
It's a little bit clearer there. So if we go back to the blues, I'm going to play the third and seventh for the first chord, F7, and you could just play on beat one of every measure. That might be a good place to start, because you're gonna, anyone ever saw the old goofy Walt Disney cartoons where he's playing guitar and his fingers get all tied in knots, it's gonna feel like that's gonna happen. Right? So because you have to learn how to coordinate stuff, so you could either just play one note or just a simple line. If you wanted to stick to a pentatonic idea, even that's cool. And it's not that you have to use these two fingers. It all depends. It's gotten to be like an instinctive thing where I don't think about it anymore. Sure. It could be these two fingers, but it all depends where I'm going.
Yeah.
And you just learn to switch without really thinking about it. Sometimes it might be these two fingers that play if I'm trying to play a line over here. Right, but I'll start here for now. Whoops.
I saw that. Yeah.
I had to play on beats 1 and 3 because
Okay.
that's a split measure where you've got two
Yes.
chords per measure.
Uh-huh.
Right. So that you kind of have to watch for that.
Right. And also I noticed you changed fingerings because you were holding the melody note down. So when you went up for the D7.
Yeah. And then at first everything's gonna grind to a halt, and then you're gonna like,
Yeah.
right. But I don't even think about it hardly that much anymore.
Right. That
Yeah.
makes sense. Yeah, and obviously the blues would be a great way to start, even before trying to play Beautiful Love
Right.
or something with a lot of 2/5s in it, just straight blues. And then if you could still stay in the blues but do some more changes, you could do more
Right.
bebop changes or whatever.
Yeah.
And still stay in the blues,
Yep. And then maybe the next step would be to worry more about the line and punctuate it with a chord.
What does that mean? Huh.
And
Right.
so on and so on.
So the line is really the priority.
Right. It should be, I think, anyway.
Right.
Not the chord.
Right.
Because a good accompanist should be listening and look for holes and not step on the soloist's toes. Anyway.
Right.
So you really do got to split your brain into kind of two people in a way.
When you and I talked about getting together and doing this video, one of the things I thought about was approaching it kind of the other way around, like play the chords as a figure that like repeats.
You could do that
and
too,
then
yeah.
generate some lines in the spaces, just because then you know where it is.
Yeah.
So would you ever do that?
Sure. Yeah. So maybe like 1, 2, 3, 4. But sometimes I just want to get that chord in there because there is a chord change.
Right.
Even though I think I was basically playing a 2-bar pattern.
Right.
Right. So I knew there was a chord change coming up. So I want people to know that there's a chord change there. So that's why I played the 3rd and the 7th for the D7.
Right. Even though it broke the 2-bar pattern.
Right.
It helped the music move forward, which is the whole thing.
And you don't always have to play a G minor 7 on the 2 chord either, because you can go.
So it could be
all dominant.
All
chords.
dominant,
yeah. And that's something that Lenny we used to do all the time, is just convert stuff to dominant chords. For one thing, it's easier and it just sounds cool. It's like it's easier, plus you get it just sounds more hip.
Yeah.
And then, he might also do things like, as far as rhythm is concerned, he might play. You get sort of a Freddie Green thing, right? It's just kind of like you can practice a lot of different ways and put it into your playing, but and it's all good. But I just kind of don't really think about it too much.
Okay.
I just listen for holes when I'm playing, and that's usually when I'll put the chord in. That's kind of my approach in a nutshell, I guess you could sort of say.
So listen when you're playing lines. Listen, like kind of anticipate where the line is going to end, and you know that when there's a gap, that's where you can put in
Right.
a little response.
Right. And it could be just one little chord jab.
Uh-huh.
Or it could be like all upbeats or something like that.
Right.
To give it more forward motion.
Huh. Man, is it? It's really eye-opening. My friend Rich Hinman has recently been on a jag with Lenny Breau, and he sent me that Girl from Ipanema recording, and then I found some other like black and white footage from the CBC.
Yeah. Those were the good old days when Lenny Breau was an actual, almost practically a star on Canadian television.
Huh. Yeah. And then I heard something from much later. This living room tapes where he's playing with a clarinet player. Do you know these?
Yeah. What's his name? Brad? Is it Brad?
Something. Yeah.
I forget the clarinet player's name. Yeah. But
yeah, and that stuff is fantastic too. And it's you know, it's just clarinet and guitar. So when the clarinetist isn't playing, you know, Lenny has a chance to do some of this stuff.
Yeah. And Brad Terry.
Brad Terry. Right?
I think his name is. Yeah.
Yeah.
And apparently Brad Terry was kind of like Don Thompson in the sense, like really being able to hear where Lenny was going. That's why Lenny liked playing with him, because he could take it really far out, and Brad was right there.
Yeah. Right. I mean, that's the whole thing, is like trying to find people to play with that are simpatico, that can hear all the stuff you're doing.
Yeah. One of my teachers that I took lessons from in Toronto studied with Mick Goodrich.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Oh.
And he also studied with Pat Metheny. Well, Pat Metheny was at Berkeley too.
Wow.
And one of the things that Pat, at least my teacher, Joey Goldstein, back in Toronto. Hello.
Okay. Hey.
He got you to sing all your lines. You know what I mean?
And why would you do that?
You can't get any more you than what you would sing. It's so personal, and it helps your phrasing sound so much more natural.
So why do you think not every teacher teaches that way?
I don't know, because I try to do that. That any of my students get them to sing. You also want to try and hear something, and to me that is the ultimate of what technique means, is to get out what you're hearing in your head to your fingers, the clearest path without any resistance. To me that is technique.
Right.
Technique isn't how fast you can play, or necessarily how perfectly executed something is, although that can be part of it. But if everything's clear up here and everything's clear on the way to the fingers, then it's going to come out exactly the way it's supposed to. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That, to me, that's all what technique really boils down to. Is learning how to get out of the way and hear what to play and be able to play it. I mean, that's a lifelong mission that all of us musicians are sort of trying to do, I think. I always say rhythm is the king first, before anything. Because that's your phrases, your rhythmic phrases. If you can put any notes you want to those phrases.
And then coming back to what we were talking about before, where if you were comping for yourself, that's now you've got kind of a whole other dimension, because you can play with rhythm in your
Right.
melody, in your line, and you can also play with rhythm in your left hand in the comping.
Yeah.
Um,
And you could, and I didn't mean to cut you off, but I just had a thought.
Yeah.
That you can also do sort of like a George Shearing, a faux George Shearing with this approach too.
Okay,
So you play your chord the same rhythm as the line.
Okay.
So maybe a.
So instead of the call and response, it's concerted.
Right. So it's almost like the George Shearing or even Bill Evans block chords.
Yeah.
It's kind of like a way to approximate like that without really coming up with a whole bunch of really
all the passing chords
right
and stuff.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Right. Interesting.
I do that a lot. I totally stole that from Lenny too.
Huh. Okay. Can you play? So we're back to Beautiful Love. Can you do it at a slower tempo?
Sure.
Please.
It doesn't sound as cool when you slow it down, but I'll do that. So
okay.
1, 2, 1, 2, 3. That kind of seesaw thing back and forth too. Dig to God,
Yeah, that feels Bill Evans-y to me for some reason.
Yeah, like I said, I've listened to a lot of Bill Evans too, because that's. I think that if you're a smart musician, if I really liked what Lenny was doing, then I would go back, and if I knew what his inspiration was, I'd go back and listen to the original source where he's getting the inspiration from. You know what I mean? And then, because I don't do everything exactly like Lenny. I didn't really sit down and so what I did is I kind of like, okay, this is what Lenny's doing. Oh, let me listen to what Bill Evans doing, and then I'll try to approximate my own thing of what he's doing as well, not just only coming from Lenny.
Right.
If that makes any sense.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Yeah, anytime you can trace something back to the roots, that's going to be informative for sure.
Yeah, and then you can do modal stuff too.
What do you mean?
So like maybe if I started down here as my E minor 7 flat 5, I can get to my A7 there. And then so all that's D7. Right?
Yeah. It's like kind of McCoy Tyner.
Right. Yeah.
Wow.
And I haven't really explored that as much, but the fourths lie really, really simply in a sense on guitar. So why not?
Right. That's in a way easier than like all the thirds and sevenths.
And you know who is a master of that is Lorne Lofsky.
Huh.
He's really good at that.
of that kind of thing with fourths on the bottom.
Right.
So if somebody's never heard Lorne Lofsky, what's a record to check out or a tune to check out?
I think the label is now defunct. Maybe we'll have to put it in the notes or something in the description, because right now the name of the album escapes me. But okay. I remember I made a recording of the same album, I think, to send to Pat Martino one time.
Oh.
Because I went to his house for a lesson one time, and I guess that's another thing too, is I was getting more into Pat Martino.
Okay.
And not really less Lenny-ish, but wanted to start doing more single line stuff.
Right.
And I said, have you ever heard of Lorne Lofsky? And he's like, no. Well, I'll send you a CD. So I burned him a CD and sent that. But
oh man, he must have loved it.
Yeah, like think of Lenny Breau and Ed Bickert mixed together with, and now that's really someone who really is explored the Bill Evans thing, like as in deep, or maybe in more depth than Lenny.
Wow. I wonder if you could show another exercise, just something actionable that people can work on to get into this style.
Well, Lenny had a really good exercise that forces you to come up with maybe new chord voicings that you've never thought of before.
Okay.
And let's just take a C major scale.
Okay.
You can either do this chromatically or think diatonically within the scale. So you could only think, say, notes of C major. So if I play, you have to think of, if I start with the note C, how am I going to voice a chord below that, right?
Wow.
So maybe this would work nice, right? And let's do a 1-6-2-5 chord progression. Okay. We'll keep all the chords diatonic if we can.
Okay, and we're going to keep C on top, or we're going to...
No, we're going to change, we're going to just go up the scale.
I see.
Every time you change the chord, you have to change the note on top to a new note.
Got it. Okay.
And right now we're starting with the note C, but you could start it with D as your first note, right? You could start it as C as your first, or E as your first note, and then you're just going up the scale every time you go. That's maybe C on the 1 chord.
Okay.
But if you go up to a D, now we've got...
So the A minor 7 has to have the D on top, because that's the next note up in the scale.
Yeah, so maybe if a lot of people are out there, maybe they've never thought about playing that voicing before.
Yeah.
Maybe to us it's not that new, right? D minor. Now you got a G7. But now let's see, because I want to try to find some kind of note in there to add some color to it, right?
Yeah.
Or I could have maybe went like that with the F on top.
Yeah.
Right? So that's like an F major over G.
Or you could do this.
Yeah, I do that lots of times, yeah. It all depends how out you want to go, but that's the whole thing. It's all about learning how to make decisions on the fly.
Right.
That's where this really comes in handy.
And this comes from Lenny.
This comes from Lenny.
Okay, so we've done 1, 6, 2, 5. Let's go one more round.
And then you're back to C. So you could do either that, right, or put the root on if you want. And then you're back to, maybe I'll make that a dominant 7 this time.
I love it.
Right, and then maybe. So now it's D7.
D7 with a 13.
Yeah, because it's just personal preference, but I usually don't like the 13th on a minor chord that often.
Right.
Because probably it introduces that tritone.
Right.
Sometimes it sounds good, and sometimes it doesn't work for me.
Yeah.
And then, so that's a D minor 7, and then you're back to a G with maybe the C on there, and then I'm just staying on 1 string for now. But you can also move to other strings.
I see.
So you can really expand this exercise.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So just to see what would happen if we started on D.
Yeah.
Now we'd have different things. Maybe.
Yeah.
Or what did you play?
I went a very Ed Bickert voicing
Nice.
actually. So it's like I'm trying to get a 9 in there with no 7. So I'm playing. It's like it's really a diminished with a major 7 technically. Right.
And then probably just
Yeah.
that.
Or you've wanted to add, try to add
nice.
a 9th in there, right? Yeah. And like I said, you can put parameters on the exercise and say I can only go up to X amount of fret, and then I have to put the melody note on the next string or something.
Right.
And don't forget to do it in reverse, because you'll get a different outcome when you go in reverse.
Oh, right. Okay. So I'm going to just start on A and see what happens.
Yeah. Nice tritone sound.
But I went with a chromatic note, but I want to say,
well,
because
you
said
you
that's
could,
another variation on the exercise,
so if
right?
if I started with that same C chord voicing, or I think that's how I learned this chord voicing, actually, is from doing that. Because I remember I had a lesson with Lorne one time, and he's like, "Oh, you could do this voicing." I go, "Yeah, I know that voicing."
Oh, wow.
And I felt so proud of myself that I knew that. So I'm making it, because it's a chromatic note, and we landed on an F sharp.
Yeah.
Then it doesn't lend itself to the minor chord, so I'm just turning it into a dominant chord. I could have done this too if I really wanted to.
What the heck is that?
Like it's a B major triad over. Right. Yeah. And then I guess we're back to the 5 chord, and since I had a sort of a funky note in there, a spicy note in there before, why not put a spicy note on this chord?
Well, then it's going to get right.
Yeah, maybe minor major 7, or with a sharp 5, or major 7 sharp 5, or we could have just turned it into a dominant too. Because you don't have to always stick to the same chord that's written in the chart as the standard.
You don't?
No.
What the heck? Wow.
Right?
Yeah.
Especially when you're improvising. Maybe it might be sort of more kosher or whatever to stick to the more familiar chords for the melody.
I guess, but a neat thing about this that occurs to me is, like, if you were accompanying a singer and you had spent a good amount of time with this exercise, you might feel freer to, like, actually play some more colorful harmony, because you've done that work with the mindset of, like, what's the melody note. Right. So you're never gonna, like, even though it might get spicy, it's still, like, if that is the vocal note, you should have a couple of choices of what you want to play under it. And not just because, I learned this cool chord, I want to throw it in there, but actually, because you've done this kind of work, that's going to sound great with that melody. Yeah. You're not just trying to, like...
And it's also good if you're into chord melody, it helps you, like, think of, like, this is the melody note, what voicing am I going to put underneath?
What a great exercise.
If you're improvising and you want, if you just want an ascending or a descending line, and you know what I mean, like, sometimes you'll hear me do that. Like, I think I did that when we were playing either the blues or the thing. I think I had, like, I just had this line going up, and I'm trying to harmonize different chords underneath. So I was thinking minor 7 flat 5. Maybe if I played the right strings. And then turn that into a dominant 7 chord, and then maybe because I want that note to go up, I'm trying not to play my 7th strings so everybody can. And then maybe
it's almost like where or when. phrase of where, when, what is it?
And that was just a happy accident.
Yeah.
It's not like I had it planned. I'm just trying to make a line go. Like you can also do it descending. Like I use this voicing for a minor 7 flat 5 a lot.
So it's E minor 7 flat 5.
Yeah, because it's got the 11th as the lowest note, but it works.
Yeah. It's not gonna fight the bass. That's
like
cool.
In an orchestra, you could voice that no problem, right? Because I'll do the same thing with just straight up minor. Like if I did that for an E minor chord, I've got the A in there.
Wow.
Instead of always thinking about the 11th as a higher voiced note, it's in the middle. You can get away with the 11th down there.
Wow.
Right? So I'm just thinking all minor there.
Right.
So you got a lot of different, even if you're just on one chord for a long time. Wow. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's kind of almost thinking more modally, right?
Right.
Right?
Wow.
Yeah. Like I said, Lorne Lofsky's amazing at that stuff.
Okay.
Yeah.
I need to listen to him some more. I know he's one of these names that keeps, comes up.
The album might even just be called Lorne Lofsky, but I have to look it up for sure.
Okay. Okay. Cool. Well, Adam, thank you so much for coming by, and what an eye-opening.
I hope I didn't wear anybody's ear out.
Well, not mine. Really appreciate these insights, and also always great to shine a light on some players that whose names that we don't know so much, like Lorne Lofsky and even and Ed Bickert, and on yourself. I mean, what a beautiful player. It's great to play with you and to hear you play, and I just really appreciate you.
Thanks.
And I want to ask Adam, where can people find you if they want to find your lessons online?
Well, I have my YouTube channel is Jazz Rocks with Adam.
Jazz Rocks with Adam.
Yeah, and I'm also building a course website right now where you can. I'm going to offer courses on improvising and stuff like that. It's not finished build yet, but if you are interested and you want to sign up for it, there's a sign up sheet if you go to the website, which is jazzmasteryacademy.com.
Well, great. I'll make sure that folks who are following on my various channels have an easy time to find you, because they should.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for having me.
Yeah, man.